What is good, you guys? My name's Mackenzie, and I have been cooking a lot during quarantine. I have made banana bread, I've made a pasta with pesto and chicken and mozzarella in a slow cooker. I've made cheesy Red Lobster biscuits, and I've also made donuts and cake pops. And that's what I'm gonna be sharing with you all today. So allow me to introduce you to a new series that I am calling Whippin' in the Kitchen. Today's recipe, off-brand Funfetti donuts and cake pops. Here are the things that you'll need. Your cake mix of choice. I'm using this off-brand Funfetti, but I also did not know until making this that the name Funfetti is actually trademarked by Pillsbury. The more you know. But this cake mix that I'm using by Betty Crocker was really good too. Make sure you have the ingredients to make your cake mix. Very important. A large mixing bowl. You'll just need several bowls, so just keep those around. A whisk. I'm using an electric handheld whisk. Your frosting of choice. As you can see, I have actual Funfetti here and buttercream, but because the cake mix I used was basically Funfetti, I decided to use the buttercream for the cake pop recipe. You need 1 cake pan and 2 donut pans. I have 2 pans of 6 for the donuts, so that makes a dozen. Don't forget your non-stick cooking spray to grease your pans. You'll also need a baking sheet and parchment paper. As for decorating the cake pops, we'll get into those ingredients later on in the video. So first things first, you're gonna wanna make your cake batter. Follow the instructions on your box. My box called for cake mix, obviously, eggs, vegetable oil, and water.
Those are organic eggs.
Whoops, I dropped the shell. You want to whip that together. A real chef. It's looking pretty good so far. And after you're done whisking, I went ahead and poured my cake batter into the donut pans first. Be wary to not pour the batter too high because, as you know, in the oven, cake rises. And so you want to leave enough room for your donuts to rise in the oven and dome over to create that donut shape. So fill each individual donut mold about halfway. That should be like a nice sweet spot. I poured the rest of the cake batter into a 9.5-inch round cake pan. Your cake pan can honestly be any size because this is the cake batter we're going to use for the cake pops, and they're not even gonna stay in the cake pan for long. So pop those into the oven for an inconspicuous amount of time. The donuts take a lot faster to cook, so I think I started with 12 minutes. I just went by the cupcake bake time on my cake box. With the cake, the rest of the cake that's in the cake pan, I think I cooked it to more towards 20 to 30 minutes. I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea how long I put it in the oven for, but a tip to know when your cake is ready is by either taking a toothpick or a fork. You want to stick it inside of your cake, and if your toothpick or fork comes out wet, there's still residue of cake mix on it, then your cake needs to bake for longer. But if it comes out dry, your cake is all done. You also want to make sure that you stick your toothpick or fork in the middle of the cake because that's typically the section that finishes last. So the donuts are all done baking, so while the other cake batter is still in the oven, we're going to begin glazing. I laid out all of my donuts onto a cooling rack, and I put a placemat underneath to catch any glaze from dripping onto the countertop. I found a really simple glaze recipe on YouTube, so I will link that right there. I really enjoyed this glaze recipe because it's not super heavy. You know how sometimes you eat sweets and you can literally taste, you can consume the sugar? That didn't make sense. You can taste the sugar. You taste the calories you're inhaling. This recipe does not taste like that. So it's really light and it doesn't really taste like you're consuming a lot of sugar. At this point, my videographer dad decided to quit his job, so he has abandoned his position. Also, my brother's family came over, so those are the people you are seeing in the background. So you want to dunk each donut into the glaze. I put the glaze in a small bowl. After I finished dunking all the donuts, I still had leftover glaze. So what I did is that I popped it back in the microwave because it had hardened a little bit. I poured it into a measuring cup and I just poured the measuring cup over the donuts. We don't want to be wasteful here. Now that the donuts are all done, we can move on to the cake pops. But before we do that, a brief announcement and we'll be right back to the show. So I just opened up my first Depop shop. If you don't already know, Depop is a free app you can download on your iPhone or your Android. We don't discriminate here. That allows you to purchase secondhand clothing. Depop is a really great way to both contribute to sustainable fashion and also support your girl, who was a broke college student. Two really great causes. If you're a petite person, a mini human, you know a mini human or a petite person, tell them to check out my shop at Shop Kenzie's Closet. I just posted my first 3 listings. There's a shorts bundle and there's 2 tops up there right now, but I'm gonna release more clothing later this week. Update. I have a lot more clothes on there now. This is kind of an old video, but y'all should go check me out at Shop Kenzie's Closet. Please and thank you. So be sure to be following me to see when I list my next few items. There's a lot of stuff I need to get rid of, so please help me. Support small businesses. So I've made cake pops in the past, and I have always run into issues. Some of my most common issues are coating the cake pop too much, that like the coating is too heavy and the cake pop falls apart. I've made the cake balls too heavy and the cake pop falls apart. I still have yet to find out the perfect way to get a clean coating over the cake pop without it looking, I don't want to say sloppy, but it doesn't look professional. Not that I'm a professional, but we strive for greatness here at Mackenzie Green Culinary. And also, I still have yet to find the perfect way to display the cake pops or store them as they're hardening, like the coating. I don't really think I found a definite answer to any of these problems, really, but I did learn some things from making cake pops this time around. So I'm gonna share them with you in a nice little segment I'm calling Cake Pop Tips. So stay tuned, because a lot went wrong. If you've never made cake pops before, the first step is to break up the cake. Literally take it straight from the cake pan, break it up, use your fingers and make it all crumbly. Make sure your hands are clean though, because we ain't spreading diseases. We're not spreading Corona 2.0. We are hygienic in these streets. Take your frosting of choice. I'm using buttercream frosting, and you're gonna wanna scoop that gradually into the cake crumbs. And use your fingers to mix that all up. Typically, you're gonna use the whole can of frosting, and the frosting is gonna act as the glue to hold your cake balls in place. Lay out a piece of parchment paper. I have mine on top of a plastic cutting board because I'm gonna use that to sort of transfer from one place to the next. And you're now gonna wanna use the palm of your hands to roll the cake into small balls. Be wary of size. You really do not wanna make them too big because, as I said earlier, if you make them too big, your cake pop can literally fall apart, and we don't want that. If you're ever doubting if your cake pop is too big, I would recommend just always sizing down. You would rather be safe than sorry. And for reference, you can use a small cookie dough scoop, about this size. Actually, this might be a little big. I don't know, look at my sizing for reference. And I just took this out the sink, so this is nasty. But after you scoop out your balls, or you just eyeball it, you get that? That was not intentional. But regardless of what you do, you really want to make sure you use your hands to round out the shape. You want it to be as smooth as possible. So transfer your cake balls onto a baking sheet and put them in the fridge to chill. I think I chilled mine for like 30 minutes. I was also kind of in a rush, so it may have not been that. But you want to chill your cake balls until they're firm. Cake pop tip. It's time for our first cake pop tip. These are the things that I did not do, but you probably should do because it would most likely make your life a little bit easier. So my first cake pop tip is to use gloves. I know this seems pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but I did not. And you see my fingers. So put 2 and 2 together, just use gloves. It's time to start decorating. Yay, cue sound effects. This actually took me bricks to do, so bear with me. Here's what you'll need. Candy melts to coat your cake balls. I chose to use springy colors, but particularly yellow, baby pink, lavender, and white. But I would recommend having a design or some sort of color scheme prepared ahead of time. You want lollipop sticks, mine are 6 inches. You need something to display your cake pops vertically. I have quart-sized mason jars, which ended up being way too big. So if you are gonna get mason jars, be sure to get smaller ones. But also in addition to that, ideally, I would recommend getting some sort of like giant block of foam or something that you can display each cake pop individually as the coating is hardening. Because with a mason jar, the cake pops are gonna touch. And while they're like hardening and while like the melts are still wet, you don't want them to touch. So like a big block of foam would be easier just to literally stick each cake ball in its own separate place and it can dry just on its own. But mason jars are good if you want to gift them or after the fact, after your cake pops are done, you can like display them in that and that's fine. Makes a really cute decoration. I've made cake pops so many times and I literally have said the same thing and I have yet to actually take my advice. Do as I say and not as I do. The last thing you'll need is a bowl. Or what I got this time is a candy melting pot by Wilton. You can really just use a bowl. That's what I've always done. But the reason I bought this pot is because I thought it'd be nice to have a way to keep the candy melts warm as I'm decorating them. So you don't have to keep rushing back from your, like wherever you're cooking to the microwave. I also like how the pots had different options. There was one for like a dual sort of situation. So there's a division, you could put 2 different types of melts in there, and then there's just one singular one. And also because the pots are silicone, you can easily just like pop them out and store your candy melts. Instead of trying to like scoop them into plastic bags, which I've done before, you can just pop them out and it's real simple. So that's why I got the candy melting pot. This is my first time using it, but you can use a bowl. That's totally fine as well. I started with the yellow and the pink candy melts in the dual candy melting pot.
Twenty minutes later.
Once your candy melts have melted, you want to dip your lollipop sticks into the melted candy melts. That's a lot of melts in one word, but stay with me. And then you want to take that stick and put it into the cake balls. You don't want your cake pops to fall apart, so doing this sort of helps the lollipop to stay in place. I'm doing this with 3 different colors because I'm doing 3 different cake pop designs. I'm doing a pink coating with the rainbow sprinkles, I'm doing a yellow coating with white drizzle, and also a lavender coating with white drizzle. Obviously, the candy melting pot only had a division for 2 colors, so I'm starting with the yellow and pink, and then I'm placing those in the first to chill. I want to say 30 minutes. Honestly, it probably was not that because once again, I was in a rush and I was tired and I wanted to eat. So I kind of rushed through this process, which I would not recommend, but I did that and I did the same with the lavender. This leads me to my most important cake pop tip. If you take nothing away from this video and if you decide to make one of these recipes on your own, please do this differently than what I did. Once again, do as I say and not as I do. Everything that you just saw up to this point, I would have personally done that the night prior. Like the cake crumbling, like the rolling it into balls, the melting your candy melts, putting the lollipop sticks into the ball, all of that. Do that the night before because it'll save you time. And if you want your sanity, your patience, I would recommend you do that. And in addition to like just not being tired and frustrated, I also think it would help for the cake pops to actually have time to fully chill and fully settle overnight. They'll be real firm and I really think that they would help make the decorating process just easier. You guys, so yesterday I put up another podcast. It is a full-length podcast. You know, we're trying to do this weekly podcast thing, Thursdays, 10 a.m. Eastern. So if you're a real one, you already knew that if you're a real one, you already know that it went up. But if you're not, I'm here to put you on. Yesterday, we talk about influencers, the positive and negative effects of influencers, what is a problematic influencer, what even makes an influencer. We talk about racism on YouTube, subscriber disparities when it comes to race and being an influencer. Here's a clip.
You have to search like really hard to find a black content creator, especially on YouTube. Like you have to type in morning routine, black girl.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to do that. I should just be able to type in morning routine and like everybody of every race and background should just pop up.
As a black person generally, you should be twice as good for anything.
Yeah, and that's she was basically saying like
just to get the same amount of recognition. If you want to hear more, you want to get woke, you want to get hip, y'all should listen to the full episode of the podcast. All you have to do is head to the link in my bio, open it in a new tab, and you can play it in the background on your phone. If you want to listen to it on a laptop or a TV or whatever, go to my website and you can also play it in the background that way. So yeah, do not sleep. 2 podcast episodes went up this week. A bonus one went up on Monday. Today is about influencers, but go check out all of them. The link is in the description. Now that your cake pops have settled overnight, it is time to start coating the cake pops. Originally, I tried to like dunk the cake pop into the pot like I saw in this video. That did not work. So I'm not sure if it's because Rosanna is using like the singular pot and I was using like the dual one with like 2 divisions, but whatever the case may be, that did not work and my cake pop fell apart. So I did find a method that worked for me though. So I took a spoon with one hand, dipped into the candy melts, and then with the other hand I had the cake pop and I just sort of drizzled it over the cake pop and just got every crack and crevice. That took a long time. It was time consuming, but the dunking didn't work. So you gotta do what you gotta do. As I mentioned earlier, I did 3 different cake pop designs. So the first one was pink, had a pink coating, and I used rainbow sprinkles. That one was super easy. I just did the pink coating with the spoon method. Before the coating melted, I made sure to put the rainbow sprinkles on top. I just sort of rotated it and sort of tapped the sprinkle container to get all of them out. I did this over like a separate smaller bowl. And I did this because I wanted these sprinkles to harden with the candy melts. So I made sure I still did it while the candy melts were warm. Now this is where the giant block of foam would come in handy because you could literally just stick your finished like cake pop into the foam and it could just harden that way. Once again, I didn't have that. So I just ended up putting it back on the parchment paper, which really isn't a big deal. Like the flavor does not change, but if you're like an aesthetics person, you like to decorate, you probably would appreciate having just like the clean look, the not flat top, just like a round cake pop. So once again, get that giant block of foam or something to display your cake pops vertically. For the yellow and lavender cake pops, I coated them as normal. And then for the white drizzle, I just took the spoon and waited till it was super thin and runny, and just sort of drizzled it over each cake pop as I rotated it. I really could have done this better. Once again, I was tired at this point. But if I would have done this differently, I would have definitely made my white candy melts super thin and super runny like you would like in a drizzle. I had a lot of problems when it came to getting my candy melts in like the right consistency. For some reason, even though I used the same pot, like all of my candy melts came out different. For example, the yellow and the yellow only had a much thicker consistency than the pink, even though I literally did them at the same time in the exact same pot. I don't understand. I think it might have something to do with like the dyes in the melts, but I have no idea. I'm not a food scientist. I just know my yellow was not normal. So I tried to thin it out using water. Don't do that because this happens. It got mad clumpy and that's not cute. It's also not usable. But I ended up losing 3 yellow like cake pops in the process. So it was just a real struggle. But I did learn that you're actually supposed to use coconut oil or coconut flakes if you want to thin your candy melts. So if you're doing like drizzle, like I was trying to do, add some coconut oil or some coconut flakes to that joint. Or if you just need to thin your candy melts out for any reason, I would recommend thinning it out using the coconut. That is another cake pop tip. But maybe if you don't have like coconut oil or coconut flakes on hand, another thing I would recommend doing is maybe just taking your pot like out of the warmer periodically. Because I found that when my candy melts were not in the warmer, they would have time to sort of settle and they wouldn't thicken. I don't know, this is at least with the yellow. I didn't have problems with all my candy melts, it was mainly just the yellow. I put all my cake pops in the fridge to chill. We finally got to eat dinner, and now I get to see how my desserts came out. Both the donut and the cake pop recipe were really good. I would highly recommend y'all try this at home. But the biggest thing is if you decide to make the cake pops, if you do nothing else that I talked about in this video, do the first half the night before. I personally think it's a huge time saver, and I personally think your cake pops might even turn out like better, at least the decorating portion. The donuts or whatever, they really do not take long to make. They are not complicated to make. I just happen to have 110 problems when it comes to the cake pops. So I hope this video would help you if you decide to make them. Thanks for watching. Once again, I'm Mackenzie. Let me know which one of these recipes you would actually make for yourself. Maybe comment below, what would you like to see me whip up in my kitchen next? And I will see you, well hopefully, either in the next installment of Whippin' in the Kitchen or whenever I post my next video, because that will also forever be a mystery.